By sunrise, 500 men were gone. An entire fleet erased.
It began long before the sun rose over the Pacific. The coastline. This wasn't a drill. It was, Satellite operators at NORAD first noticed faint signals, small heat signatures moving west to east. But they didn't match any known exercises or registered fleets. The ships carried no transponders, and the pattern was unlike anything commercial. For hours, Command thought it was a glitch. But as the signatures multiplied, the truth became out there, past the mist and the cold Pacific waves. Iran's navy was moving, not as a show of strength in the Gulf, but as a ghost formation on America's doorstep. The operation had been planned for years under absolute secrecy. Cargo ships modified into missile carriers, submarines operating on silent running, and a small detachment of elite forces trained for one impossible mission: to strike U.S. soil direct. No one thought it could happen. No one imagined. But what? At 3:42 a.m., for every word of each and every word of each. By the time it reached Tehran, the fleet was already within 600 nautical miles of the coast.
They called it Task Force Rod, the Thunder. 12 vessels, each modified in secret shipyards along Iran's southern coast. On the surface, they looked like aging cargo freighters and fishing trawlers, but beneath their hulls, hidden compartments held anti-ship missiles, drones, and small submersibles armed with torpedoes. Every ship carried soldiers who had sworn to vanish from the world if the mission failed. Their plan was simple and insane. Approach under civilian disguise. Stay dark. Once close enough to the U.S. coastline, release the swarm. Drones, fast boats, and commandos meant to cripple communication lines before the Americans even understood what hit them. But Iran's commanders misunderstood one crucial fact. In modern warfare, there is no such thing as invisibility. 200 miles overhead, an American stealth satellite, officially still in testing phase, had been silently tracking them for nearly 9 hours. Its cameras could read serial numbers on missile tubes through layers of cloud. And somewhere deep under the Pacific, a single U.S. submarine was already moving to intercept. Inside the Iranian flagship Sahand, tension was masked as confidence. Officers checked instruments that showed nothing unusual. The U.S. coast looked empty on their radar screens. No aircraft, no destroyers, just open water. The illusion was perfect, and that was exactly how American command wanted it. At 4:18 a.m., the fleet split into 3 groups to reduce detection. One headed north toward Washington State. Another drifted south toward California. The last and most heavily armed section maintained a straight line toward Oregon, the center of the invisible trap. On U.S. soil, beach towns were still asleep. Gas station lights glowed faintly on empty highways. No alarms, no warnings. And yet, deep beneath Colorado Springs, the NORAD command center pulsed with red alerts. Every movement, every change in bearing was being mapped in real time. By dawn, America had seen enough. The president's order was simple. Let them come closer.
By the time the first hints of light touched the Pacific horizon, the decision had already been made. At precisely 5:02 a.m., every major U.S. defense network, from San Diego to Pearl Harbor, was linked into one encrypted channel. The operation's codename? Black Tide. Inside the NORAD command center, the air was sharp and cold. Coffee cups stood untouched beside keyboards as analysts stared at the moving dots on their screens. The Iranian fleet had no idea they were now sailing inside a digital cage. In Washington, the president's voice cut through the line, calm but firm. We're not firing first. They cross the line, we finish it. Across the Pacific, silent machines began to move. From bases in Alaska, stealth UAVs launched into the clouds. From San Diego, 2 destroyers, USS Zumwalt and USS Preble, activated radar silence and turned north at combat speed. And deep underwater, the USS North Dakota, a Virginia-class attack submarine, adjusted course to intercept. For the Americans, the plan was simple in theory, deadly in practice. Let the invaders come closer, where every move could be predicted, tracked, and countered with surgical precision. At 5:47 a.m., U.S. Space Command confirmed the Iranian fleet had entered the, quote, red zone, a region of ocean surrounded by invisible tripwires, satellite-guided buoys that tracked acoustic and thermal signatures. Every click of sonar, every wave displacement, every change in temperature painted a clearer picture. Meanwhile, in Tehran, encrypted updates were reaching command. The reports looked promising. No resistance, no interception. Celebration came early. Admirals believed they had achieved the impossible, reaching American waters undetected. But 30,000 feet above the fleet, a stealth drone, call sign Reaper 9, had already locked onto every vessel. Its onboard AI mapped exact missile positions, crew movement, even which ships carried live warheads. At 6:15 a.m., the green light appeared on the command screen. The president gave the order with a single word: execute. The calm Pacific morning was about to explode.
The first strike didn't come from the sky. It came from silence. At 6:17 a.m., the USS North Dakota launched 2 MQ-25 torpedoes from a depth of 400 feet. They sliced through the water like lightning, unseen, unheard, until the sea itself erupted beneath the Iranian flagship Sahand. A single flash. Then the roar of breaking steel. Above the surface, confusion turned instantly to chaos. Commanders shouted in Farsi, scrambling to understand what had happened. To them, it felt like the ocean had exploded on its own. No radar warnings, no aircraft in sight, just destruction, sudden and absolute. Before they could regroup, the second phase began. From 30,000 feet, Reaper 9 dropped its payload, precision-guided munitions designed to detonate within meters of target coordinates. Each strike landed with surgical accuracy. The horizon flickered orange. Fire bloomed across the waves. The fleet's communications collapsed almost immediately. Satellite links jammed. Radio frequencies drowned in white noise. Iranian operators tried switching to backup relays, but even those had been compromised hours earlier by cyber teams stationed in Colorado Springs. From the coast, U.S. Navy destroyers advanced like shadows. The Zumwalt's deck guns came alive, spitting tungsten rounds at near supersonic speed. Every impact tore through the disguised cargo hulls like paper. For the first time, Iranian commanders realized what was happening. They hadn't infiltrated enemy waters. They'd sailed straight into a pre-built kill box. One after another, ships caught fire. Fuel lines burst. Missiles cooked off in their tubes, igniting chain reactions that turned entire vessels into floating infernos. And then came the third strike, the one they never saw coming. Dozens of loitering munitions, disguised earlier as civilian communication drones, suddenly powered on. Controlled remotely by U.S. operators, they descended like a cloud of mechanical hawks, diving through smoke and fire to pick off anything still moving. By 6:29 a.m., half the Iranian task force was gone. By 6:41, radar showed only debris. And by 6:50, the Pacific was quiet again, as if nothing had ever happened. But the battle wasn't over. Something was still moving beneath the waves. Something bigger and closer to the shore than anyone realized.
While fire tore across the surface, the real battle was happening in the dark. Hundreds of meters below, the ocean hid what radar couldn't see. Iran's silent strike group. 3 Ghadir-class submarines, built for shallow water ambushes, were now deep in American waters. Their mission? To destroy anything that carried the U.S. flag once the surface battle began. but they were already being hunted. The USS North Dakota had switched from offense to pursuit mode. Its sonar arrays stretched across the depths like invisible ears, catching every tremor, every mechanical heartbeat in the water. Then, a faint ping. Movement 18 miles north. The chase began. The Iranian sub Nahang 2 turned hard to starboard, trying to hide in a thermal layer, a band of warm water that distorts sonar readings. For a moment, it worked. The American crew lost contact for almost 40 seconds. 40 seconds of silence that felt like hours. Inside the control room, tension built like pressure in the hull. The captain of the North Dakota whispered a single command. Hold depth. Wait for the rise. And then it happened. The Nahang 2 climbed slightly, just enough to breathe, just enough to be seen. The sonar trace flared back to life. The American submarine released one torpedo, an MQ-25 ADC-AP with active guidance. It cut through the black water at nearly 60 knots, adjusting course every second. The Iranian crew tried countermeasures, decoys, noise emitters, but the torpedo ignored them all. Impact came 32 seconds later. A flash beneath the surface. Pressure waves rolled out like thunder. The other two Iranian subs scattered. One dove dangerously low, scraping along the seabed. The other turned east, desperate to escape toward open water. But the Pacific wasn't open anymore. Every path was sealed by sonar nets and drone buoys. Within 20 minutes, the USS North Dakota had locked them both. 2 more launches, 2 more eruptions of deep water fire. At 7:14 a.m., silence returned once again. Sonar feeds showed nothing but fading echoes. The last of the Iranian underwater fleet was gone. On the surface, oil slicks spread slowly across the waves, mixing with the rising light of dawn. The trap was complete. But for U.S. Command, the mission wasn't over yet. Something was still coming, not from the sea, but from the sky.
By 7:18 a.m., the ocean had turned into a floating graveyard. Smoke and fire marked the remains of what had once been Iran's proud amphibious force. But far to the east, along the rugged cliffs of Oregon, 2 American coastal batteries stood waiting. They hadn't fired a single shot yet. Their time had come. Hidden in reinforced bunkers beneath layers of camouflage netting, the batteries were armed with RGM-184 Harpoon Block 2+ missiles, America's most trusted sea killer. Each launcher contained 12 canisters, each missile guided by GPS and active radar homing, each one capable of slicing through a destroyer's hull like paper. At exactly 7:21 a.m., U.S. Naval Command transmitted a single encrypted command. The code name? Thunderline. Within seconds, the still morning air exploded into motion. 24 Harpoons roared out of their launch tubes, leaving behind pillars of flame and smoke that split the dawn. Their engines ignited, driving them low, just 15 feet above the sea, skimming the waves at almost Mach 0.9. From the Iranian perspective, the horizon suddenly erupted. Their radar screens, already damaged and flickering, filled with blinding noise. The surviving ships turned frantically, their crews screaming commands over failing comms, but it was too late. The first salvo hit at 7:22:14. 2 missiles struck the same vessel, an amphibious transport carrying fuel and ammunition. The detonation was apocalyptic. A shockwave ripped through the formation, engulfing 2 nearby ships in flames. Steel twisted, decks buckled, tanks and APCs stored below deck cooked off in chain explosions that lit up the sea like sunrise. 5 seconds later, the second wave arrived. 8 Harpoons slammed into retreating ships. 1 missile tore clean through the hull of an Iranian command vessel before detonating mid-ship. The entire bridge vanished in a fireball. Another missile hit a transport still trying to launch landing craft. The explosion vaporized the water around it, leaving nothing but fragments of hull and smoke where the ship had been. Inside the U.S. operations bunker, silence reigned except for the soft hum of radar screens. No one cheered, no one spoke. They simply watched the enemy vanish, one red blip at a time. By 7:24 a.m., the last Harpoon found its mark, the final Iranian ship attempting to flee west into open water. Its engines were still running when the missile hit. Then came the flash, the shock, and finally, silence. The Pacific calmed again. Only burning wreckage floated on the surface, steel, oil, and debris stretching for miles. The kill box was empty. Every target destroyed, every risk eliminated. For the first time in the operation, U.S. Command issued the words everyone had been waiting for. Black Tide confirmed, mission complete.
By 8 a.m., the Pacific had gone silent. The sea, moments ago a wall of fire and thunder, was now a graveyard of steel. Smoke drifted across the water, where Iran's proud amphibious fleet had vanished beneath the waves. U.S. recovery teams moved in fast. Seahawk helicopters skimmed the surface, pulling shivering survivors from the freezing 52-degree waters. Of the 500 Iranian Marines who had set sail, barely 200 remained alive. Every ship destroyed, every tank gone. Over 6,000 tons of armor resting on the ocean floor. America's casualties? 0. At 10:15 a.m., the Pentagon confirmed what the world was already hearing. An attempted hostile incursion on U.S. waters has been neutralized. No American losses. The global reaction was instant. Headlines filled the airwaves. Iranian fleet obliterated in under 6 minutes. Operation Black Tide, America's deadliest naval defense. In Tehran, silence. Officials denied, then disappeared. Satellite images released by the U.S. showed oil slicks stretching for miles. Undeniable proof of total annihilation. Captured Iranian officers carried encrypted tablets detailing 2 more invasion plans, both shut down within 36 hours. Analysts called it the most decisive naval defeat since the Falklands War. Recruitment in the U.S. Navy spiked 47% within days, and in war colleges around the world, a new phrase became doctrine: the kill box. The message was simple. America would not just defend its borders, it would erase any threat before it landed. By nightfall, the fires had faded. The Pacific was calm again, but the silence was heavy. Not peace, but deterrence. Forged in precision, discipline, and overwhelming power. Peace exists only because someone stands ready
Inside
to
a
enforce
secure
it.
intelligence facility in Langley, Virginia, analysts gathered around 3 water-damaged tablets recovered from the wreckage. Each device was encrypted with military-grade ciphers. Within 36 hours, U.S. cyber teams broke through. What they found changed everything. The invasion off Oregon wasn't meant to be the last. It was meant to be the first. 2 more operations were already in motion, one targeting California's Humboldt Bay, the other the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. Codenamed Operation Dawnfire and Silent Crescent, both were scheduled within weeks. Each involved foreign technical advisors, not Iranian. Metadata revealed signatures linking back to servers in Moscow and Beijing. The files detailed logistics, fuel supply routes, and encrypted communications routed through proxy networks in Central Asia. In short, Iran hadn't acted alone. The findings reached the White House by midnight. A quiet, closed-door meeting followed. The President, the Joint Chiefs, and the heads of intelligence. Their conclusion was chilling. This was not an isolated gamble. It was a test. a probe to measure America's detection speed, strike precision, and political will. And that test had failed for the attackers. Operation Black Tide had exposed their playbook before it could ever unfold again. Within days, U.S. Cyber Command launched a counteroffensive, silently dismantling hundreds of digital relay points across 5 countries. No press release, no warning, just silence, the same kind that followed the battle. Weeks later, analysts reviewed the aftermath. Iran's naval chain of command was fractured, its leadership humiliated. But deep within those decrypted files, one phrase kept appearing in Persian, English, and Russian alike. Phase 2, suspended until further notice. The war that never began had already ended. But intelligence officials knew better. The world had only just entered a new kind of battlefield. One fought not on maps or oceans, but in code, deception, and silence.